Hello, friends, and welcome to the Friday Conversation. We're here today to discuss the upcoming anthology. It's released on November 12th, No Happy Endings, which I love the title, by the way. But Armanis, will you start us off with an introduction, and we'll pass it on to someone else?
Sure. So my name's Armanis Arfeniel, your local unhinged, sarcastic elf. So I curated this anthology for no happy endings. That's just who I am because I like to be miserable all the time.
Nice.
I'll go ahead and just pass this off to Kieran because he worked very closely with me on it.
Yeah. My name's Kieran Ferrara, and I'm the editor of No Happy Endings. And I've never tried grimdark, but it was an adventure. It was fun. Ben?
Hi, I'm Ben Sherman. I'm a longtime writer, but only the past few recent years have I gotten into publishing my works. It's mostly short fiction, but I'm looking for novels now. But I'm lucky enough to be part of this anthology, and I wrote Paths of Vengeance.
Nice. And DB.
Hello, I'm DB Rook. I'm the author, the only novel I've got at the minute, my debut, Callous and Crow, and I've got a story in No Happy Endings called The Hand That Feeds.
And last but not least.
Hi, I'm Ali John. I write sci-fi and fantasy, and I contribute to the sci-fi story Letters from the Front to the anthology.
Nice. So what is the idea behind the anthology? We know it's grimdark, but is there a theme, or what's the idea behind it?
Well, I guess I'll kind of go ahead and answer that. So this is an unusual anthology because anthologies typically follow a specific type of theme, concepts, and whatnot. This anthology is defined by the ending. So each story that was submitted, every character and every arc, you are going to go this is the equivalent of a tragedy. If you're reading Romeo and Juliet or Jane Eyre, it doesn't end happily for the main characters that we're following. The main difference is what those unhappy endings look like. So that's the main idea of this anthology is the ending of each story.
And how did everyone become involved in the anthology?
I think everyone pretty much became involved through Facebook and a couple of the Facebook groups in there. That's how I met Armanis. I think Ben's a couple of them too. And yeah, I just think it came through that.
It was Discord, Twitter for me, but yeah, pretty similar.
So DB was through Facebook, through a mutual group that we troll every once in a while called Grimdark Writers and Readers, where we harass Michael Fletcher every now and again. Kieran, Facebook. Ben was Twitter. Ollie John, I'm sure he responded via email because he's the only one who submitted through email directly. So I don't know how, if he,
I saw one of your posts on Facebook.
That's it. All right.
I wasn't even sure if it was a real thing. I was like, this is 50% might be a scam, but I'll fire it off anyway and see what happens.
No, you got to be careful with those scammers. That they're out in droves. Yeah, but you never know until you hit send, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did Michael Fletcher help, or what did you bother him about?
Everything.
It's dark.
Particularly if we could use his scary tavern.
Sorry, DB, what were you saying?
Just Michael Fletcher's dark overtones across the internet sort of drew us into some kind of order.
Yeah. And is this everyone's first? Kieran, you mentioned it's your first time in Grimdark. Is this everyone else's first time? I know DB, you've been, but for Ellie and Ben, was it your first time?
Yeah.
No, I've done one before that. Well, I like to write it often, but I've only had one published before that.
And Ellie, was it your first time?
I don't normally dabble in grimdark, but I figured this story fit the bill nicely.
Yes. And are any of the stories connected in any way, or are they all individual? Is there an overlying connectivity through all the stories, or is just everyone did their own thing?
It's pretty much all everyone did their own thing.
Yeah, there are only two stories in there that are in the same world, but they're towards the end. That was part of my own passion project, and someone else who asked to write a story. That's also in there. But other than that, all the worlds are different. Even the genres themselves are not always the same. So it's like the grimdark is like the only consistent thing to it. There's some science fiction, and then there's some fantasy.
I will say that even though my story isn't connected with anyone else's, I nominally sort of say that this story and my other grimdark story I wrote are in the same universe. But I can't say that for a hard fact because I think I don't know if I could say that, but in my head that's how I think of it. And the other one was a sort of high medieval Beowulf sort of callback, and this one's more Conan the Barbarian, Stygian kind of stuff, or Stygian.
No. Big Conan fan.
Yeah.
I was surprised to how much influence, with how much Lovecraft influence was in Conan.
Yeah, Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft were correspondents. I know that much at least.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of Howard put references on some of the gods in his stories, and Lovecraft did the same thing too. Mm-hmm. And they also got Robert Bloch in there too, and a whole bunch of other writers who helped fill out the mythos.
Yeah.
It blows my mind that the Lovecraft mythos is public domain now, that it's kind of open to anyone to use. It's pretty wild. And
that's true.
How much? Yeah. Definitely. And is this everyone's first time writing a short story, or has anybody been published with novels, or what's your experience with short stories, short fiction specifically?
I have a whole bunch of stuff that I'm actually currently writing one now. I have a couple of others too. As for short story-wise, novels, I try, but the short story seems to be the best for me.
I've got a couple of shorts sort of available, and the reason I wrote shorts was because my novel Callous and Crow was so written in such a specific kind of formulaic way. When I finished writing the first book, I needed to stretch my wings a little bit, so I went back to my roots. Dark fantasy, something that's got so much continuity and millions of characters to sort of look after. Just kind of wanted to stretch some different muscles, and that's what became the one that came into No Happy Endings.
And Ellie, was this your first time?
It's my first short story that's been published in print. I write a lot, but they all just end up on the internet.
Short fiction is definitely an art form in itself.
Yeah.
It is.
I've written, let's see, I've written a novella, I've written a novelette, I've written a couple of short stories. One I want to get published soon. That's kind of grimdark, but I've written 2 short stories that haven't been published. I've mostly done short fiction so far. I'm focusing on novels now, but it's mostly been short stories or novellas, novelettes, like 40,000 words or less the last like 4 years or so.
Well, Steve, you know me. I'm already all over the place. Short stories are more new for me, so I'm doing a lot more of those than I have been. Yeah, so this is my first attempt at a short story.
Oh, what was that experience like? How different was it to tell a story within a few thousand words?
I guess I should preface this. My second attempt. My first attempt is just very difficult to read, and not for the reason you think. Not because it was edited poorly. I'll tell you that much. It's been interesting because a lot of the themes, like you can't spend too much time on it because you really have to focus on the plot, and it's really difficult to get all of the nitty gritty details that you want to get, especially in something that is grimdark, within a couple thousand words. So it was a challenge, but it was a much needed one.
I think the biggest challenge in a short story is having the purpose for it to be a short story and not to be anything longer. It's like you've got to land, you've got to tell your story, and then you've got to finish it, and it's done.
Yeah, I remember writing mine, and I think I had to chop out like 300 to 400 words to get the 10K count. I was like, man, I really don't want to do that, but I kind of had to. So.
Somehow you're on mute, Steve.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was taking a drink of water, and I pulled a newbie move and forgot to unmute myself. Sorry.
You're good.
Yeah. You would think a short story would be easier, but it's really not. It's in some ways harder, I would think, to write a short story than to stretch it out longer and to have enough room to kind of explore different things, and to write it short can be really tough. To write an effective, like a good short story.
Yeah. True. Because it's not an excerpt. It's not a big story that you chop down into a tiny bite-sized piece. It's actually got to have its own structure and its own kind of ending and purpose. Yeah.
I think it's even more important to outline a short story than even a novel, because like I feel like an outline helps you keep the story tight. Whereas, because like, as a writer, you want to explore a lot. And so with a short story, you just kind of like, okay, I just need to get this scene out and this scene out. And like like 1 goes to 2 and then 3, and they have to connect. And just like bam, bam, bam. Whereas with a novel, you could, even though I haven't published a novel, I've written one. I know how it's like. And like, you're just like, well, I guess I could explore this for, a few thousand words. It doesn't really matter. There's plenty of word count to get to. So, but with this, you really have to just make sure it's all really, really stuck together. And not a lot of filler. So.
Yeah, for me, it's when I'm doing a novel, I may maybe tell you one thing, one sentence, another thing, another sentence, and so on. But short story, really trying to get maximum amount that you can convey to the reader in like as few sentences as you can. So honestly went back through mine once I'd finished it and said, can I actually just take some stuff out, see if I can say something extra in what's already there?
Oh, see, my problem is I'm the opposite way. I can write a short story and have it complete. Take me a while, but I'll do it. Novel-wise, I can't seem to figure out how to add more to make it longer.
Yeah.
Oh, was there a minimum word count?
I think it was.
There was a cap. I put a cap of 10,000 words. So these stories are longer than your typical anthology. So like an anthology, like each short story would probably be somewhere between like 4,000 to 6,000 words. While many of the short stories here are closer to 10,000 words, like it's like 4,000 to 10,000 words. There is one short story that is over 10,000 words. But that was rather the exception because that submission made me physically sick. And I just knew like that had to be, that this had to be the one that I included. So, but other than that, everything is underneath 10,000 words.
And how many stories are total in the collection?
7.
7, yeah.
Oh, wow. Nice. And DB, I forgot, I didn't get a chance to ask you last time we talked, but do you listen to your music when you write?
No, absolutely not. I'm a massive music fan, but I cannot listen while I write. I have to have as close to silence as possible, which frustrates the hell out of me because I can be inspired by music, but actually when I come down to putting words down, I need silence. So it's annoying, but no, not for me.
What about everyone else?
Yeah, I listen to music. I have it as background noise. Plus, it also helps. Like sometimes I'll actually put references to the music in my work or stuff like that.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Good.
Oh, thanks, Ben. Yeah, I have music on all the time. At the moment, I'm going through a lot of 80s fantasy film soundtracks when I'm writing. So it gives me the mood.
I would say definitely I would usually have, like, I have written without music before, but like I think definitely I need either music or like a movie. Like sometimes I can concentrate on both, sometimes I can't, but music definitely helps. And if it's a movie I've seen plenty of times before, that helps a lot too. So I could just writing, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll listen to like three types of things while I write. It's like either like some kind of like soundtracks that does not have any words to it, or B, maybe something poppy as long as it's in a language I do not understand. And the third is screaming children, but that's a rarity.
And Ellie, do you have a favorite? I know you mentioned the soundtracks. Do you have a favorite soundtrack?
Oh, Wizards.
I don't think I've heard that one.
Oh, Ralph Bakshi.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. For me, it's the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack. Best soundtrack of all time.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Not that I can listen to it while I'm writing, but I can still enjoy it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, anything Michael came in.
It depends for me. Like I might be like it can range from like Billy Joel to like let's see, like Seether or yeah, or video game soundtrack too. Or I know this last short story that I haven't published yet, but that I wrote. I listened to the Lord of the Rings soundtrack because it really helped. But I remember listening to what was it? I would need to think about the band. It was a hard rock band when I was making this Paths of Vengeance. It wasn't Seether. It was another one. I forgot which one it was, but I need to think of it. But that was, yeah. I guess I'd say usually hard rock, but sometimes it's movies or video game stuff like that.
It wasn't Battlelore, was it?
No.
Okay.
Good guess though.
Seems like soundtracks are a pretty good neutral background noise type of choice for writing. I don't know if heavy metal or like metal would be I think that'd be more distracting than helpful.
Not for me.
It depends on sorry, go ahead.
No, you got it, man. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it depends on the kind of scene you're. I mean, I guess it doesn't even have to depend if you're in the mood for heavy metal. But like, remember in my novella, I was listening to some pretty hard stuff, and especially during a fight scene. And I remember specifically writing a fight scene that I was very proud of, while also listening to like sort of a mix of rock and metal, and I was like, okay, this is really good. I don't remember writing most of it, but I remember that part, just because like, oh, I wrote this pretty well, and I remember the music I was listening to it though.
I'm a metal fan, so I listen to metal every day, pretty much all the time. So it doesn't like really affect me one way or another, unless it's something I haven't heard before. Then I actually stop what I'm doing to actually take the time to listen to the music.
Yeah.
For short stories, how many was it? Are they pretty quick to write, or do you find them to take longer or shorter than other work? Because I know it's short fiction, but is it easier or harder to edit it and to kind of break it down and to get it perfected, ready for publishing?
I don't know about the rest of you guys, but for me, it's more the more part is actually the writing of it, getting down paper, because I have it all up here. I don't plan it. I just write and have ideas, see where it goes. And that could take anywhere from like maybe a day to months, because it's just how I am. But after that, like editing wise, it's actually pretty quick. Edit it to like maybe like a week or two, like let it sit and look at it again.
Yeah, I think for me, setting off on that journey and starting that first story is really quick, because it's something that I just want to get out. And then once it's kind of like a lump of clay on the table, then there's time to mold it and make sure it's a full story. But the actual concept, the theme, and the first 1,000 words, I can write in an instant, and then it's like it's actually worth being a story or not. That time consuming bit.
One more time, sorry, DB.
So yeah, there's a speed to the first 1,000 words and the concept, the theme. I see it like a lump of clay. I can get a lump of clay, I can throw it on the table, I can start making something really quick, and then the rest of it. Is this a full story? Is it complete? What else needs to happen? That's the bit that takes more time.
I would say for me, it's pretty standard. I would say that short stories don't take too long for me. I remember this one, I wrote it in about a week. I cordoned off a week and just made sure I put it all down on paper. And then I obviously editing takes longer than that. But I'm not sure. I mean, I suppose it would make sense for the short story to take longer to editing, but I'm not sure about that yet. But yeah, I would say that short stories don't take me too long, depending. I mean, I think for short stories, it's easier to try to be more of a perfectionist because there's less filler to distract yourself with, and you're just like, okay, I need to make sure this is all good. But at the same time, I do think it definitely takes a shorter amount of time to put it all down. But some short stories have taken me longer than others. But yeah, I'd say it's. I think with my novella and my novel, it took around the same amount of time. Whereas the short stories, I guess I'm just used to writing them, so it doesn't take more than a few weeks. If, like I said, a week for this one. But I guess it depends.
I find short stories really easy to get out quickly. 2 or 3 evenings of worth of writing. And that's just because, like, when I have an idea that I actually want to make a start on, I'm so full of enthusiasm for it. I can just, it just pours out of me. And then, give it a week's break and come back to edit it. And so it's a very fast process, the short stories.
Yeah.
So how I approach my short stories is I will drink about a pot of coffee and give myself a solid rule that I am not permitted to go to the bathroom before I finish the rough draft.
Wow.
Really,
That's putting pressure on
jest.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a great. Needing to go to the bathroom is a great motivator, but I usually just do my writing first thing in the morning. But it doesn't take me that long. Usually not more than a couple days.
For the anthology, was it a big submission window, or how long was the submission window, and how was it to gather all the stories and put them all together? And how is there a strategy, or is there a kind of a way to put them in a certain order, or did you just toss them together?
So that's a multifaceted question. So considering this was my first anthology, and I did some research in advance, but I kind of set my time window from the first person whom I signed, because then I actually had like a submission date that I had to have things done by. So I think I stopped taking submissions January of last year. So a lot of it was like asks and like sending out the notices of like, hi, I've got this anthology, and this is a paid anthology, and I paid by the word for everyone who submitted, and my wallet was not too happy with that, but it was something that I enjoyed doing. As far as putting things together, I definitely was trying to focus on what it is that I think most people like would enjoy first, after like reading everything. So it took a lot of like what works best in comparison to others, and there was a submission in there that was like relatively short that I kind of like lumped 3 of them together because they felt like they could be in the same world. And those were like kind of in the middle. And that's kind of how I approached it. Bless you.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. We've already talked a little bit about Conan and some influence, but what is everyone else's influence, or what got everyone into writing and into the craft?
Conan was definitely my first foray into fantasy. So for me, the three pillars of my fantasy fandom is Robert E. Howard, Raymond E. Feist, Robin Hood. They're my foundations that got me. I mean, obviously, Callus and Crow is not traditional fantasy. It's not kind of medieval and that sort of thing. But my whole reason to write was fantasy, and they're the three people who are responsible for unleashing me on the world.
I say for me, it's like maybe part of a two-pronged thing. Like what got me into reading, and then what got me into writing. Reading was Bram Stoker with Dracula, the Conan Doyle with his Sherlock Holmes stories. Mm-hmm. And then as for writing wise, it was mainly Douglas Adams and the Hitchhiker's Guide trilogy, and then the pulps from the 20s to the 50s. Especially like Raymond Chandler, Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard.
I'd say for me, I remember I got big into, I would say the Dritz books by R.A. Salvatore really got me. I really liked those a lot, and that was probably what really got me into reading and fantasy. I mean, I'd been into fantasy before. Well, okay, The Lord of the Rings really got me into fantasy, but the R.A. Salvatore's books I kind of ate up. And I also loved Warhammer books like Gotrek and Felix with William King. And I love those. And 40K too. And let's see. You know, I've read Star Wars books. I've read more obviously stuff like Conan the Barbarian and different things. But let's see. Yeah, I'd say all of that really started getting me into wanting to make my own stories, but I've always been a big fantasy and science fiction guy. But I think it was around when I was 19 or 20 when I really got into it. Yeah, I still read all kinds of books like that and different things besides, of course. But yeah, I'd say R.A. Salvatore, William King, and maybe people like Richard Baker, R. Lee Byers, or Graham McNeil, few guys like that that I really enjoy and really set me on the path to writing more, I would say.
I got into reading writing via the Black Library. So Kim Newman, Dan Abnett, writing 40K and Warhammer.
Nice.
Yeah, and then read a little bit around them as well. So I've got maybe Julian May and Alistair Gray kind of introduced me to kind of more legitimate literature, I would say.
You mentioned Warhammer, and I guess that's kind of where the grimdark title came from. And I know we can go round and round with. The funny thing about grimdark to me is that no one can agree on what it is.
Yeah,
so everyone has a different definition of what is or isn't grimdark. So I have to ask all of you, because it's mandatory whenever we talk dark fantasy, what is grimdark to you?
I think it's a celebration of the dark bits that kind of get left out when the cookie cutter comes. The dark bits that are left. I mean, I heard a really interesting sort of take on the 40K thing recently, where I think it was Dan Abnett in an interview was saying the unique thing about the 40K universe is that as people who write and watch and sort of read things that they want to escape from, the 40K universe is not somewhere any one of us want to be in. Whereas sort of like Star Wars and your Star Trek, you'd love to live in that world. 40K, you absolutely don't want to be anywhere near it. You adore it. It's like the dark bits that we don't want, but we want to experience, but we don't want to actually have in real life.
I would say grimdark. Well, I would say dark fantasy is a sort of more horror, maybe a little bit more occult, whereas I think grimdark can certainly have those elements and can have those as themes, but I think grimdark is sort of dark fantasy, but it's more down to earth, more gritty, um, more sort of boots on the ground in the mud.
Yeah.
Whereas at the same time, I feel like grimdark fantasy is a bit more human. Um, but you could also say like things like Tolkien, because I'm a big Tolkien fan. I love his books. I remember in school I read The Hobbit like once a year. Um, but like Lord of the Rings is a little bit darker than The Hobbit, but I've read those obviously as well. But like I think the coolest parts of his stuff were, because he could get surprisingly dark too. People don't really talk about it, but he can. And I think the coolest parts of his stuff was the darkness, and I feel like that he made this sense of hopelessness as well. And I'm not going to argue that Tolkien is grimdark, but I'm saying like that I think grimdark is sort of taking the hopelessness and sort of the darkness of dark fantasy and putting it into a more gritty, ruddy human story, where that melds well with the sword and sorcery genre, I think. But also, clearly like science fiction and 40K, not just fantasy, but like it can meld well with that too. I think it's like you need a world that is not very hopeful as well, or at least you're in a setting that's not very hopeful. Maybe the other side of the world is hopeful, but your side is not. So, yeah, I would say that would be a grim dark story, as long as the setting itself is grim and the plot is dark, and you put those together, and I think that could be pretty well. But it could also have some levity too. But like, I think the levity is the exception to the rule. It's what makes the other stuff darker, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. The humor definitely helps the horror become more horrible, in my opinion. As for someone who never really encountered grimdark before this anthology, I'm surprised by how much it actually, in a way, I maybe kind of read grimdark if you consider like some of Robbie House or going back to Lovecraft, some of his stuff where it's really fucking dark. Like, yeah, it's insane. It has to do with insanity and psychosis. Even going back to Poe too, got to Telltale Heart. You can technically, like, it's really dark, but it's not. Oh, I think what you said, Ben was right. Like, it has to be both grim as a setting and dark, and it's not happy.
Yeah.
So if someone came to you and said, "And I want to experience grimdark, I've never read it," what book could you recommend to them?
I think I'd jump in with Joe Abercrombie. Anything by Joe Abercrombie. I think the defining moments of a war in a Joe Abercrombie book. Grimdark will have you trudging through the mud, smelling the soldiers' shit that they've just done in a hole. Yeah. You know what I mean? It will be the visceral, dark, horrendous stenches of war. Whereas another book will be a lot of soldiers go up a hill and kill a load of enemies, and they won't go near that stuff. And Joe Abercrombie, although his books are dark and they're very entertaining, they're funny at times, but he's not scared to go into that dirty, gritty, grimness.
I would say Gotrek and Felix by William King, probably. I love those books, and I think that's what got me into grimdark. Tolkien and Ari Salvatore got me into fantasy, but I think I think Gotrek and Felix books got me into grimdark, and I think that's true for a lot of people. And it's got comedy, but it's very, very just, how would I put it? It's fun, but it's super dark, and it's super. You just feel like you're trudging through the mud with them, and you're facing down horrors as well, while at the same time, and the heroes are very flawed, but at the same time, you're still rooting for them. I'd say that. I'd also say, obviously regular stuff like Moorcock stuff and Robert E. Howard and let's see. How come I can't think of the name of this? I would say Gotrek and Felix. If someone asked me that, I'd recommend them that.
Yeah, I would concur with Gotrek and Felix.
Really? Yeah.
For me, like, something that really defines grimdark in my mind is the very first Gotrek and Felix story where they're off to find some mage who's been kidnapped by some mutants, and they find actually she's like in the middle of this demon orgy, and rather than go back and tell her parents, they're like, let's just walk away.
Yeah.
We don't have to get involved in this any more than we are.
Yeah, they find this dark ritual, and these people are like, please help our daughter. And the her boyfriend that they don't approve of, that turns out that both of them are a part of the dark ritual willingly as acolytes. And so they didn't get kidnapped. They ran away and to summon demons. And after Gotrek and Felix kills them all, yeah, they're just like, this is a bad situation. Let's go.
Yeah.
I mean, that just sounds like a vacation.
Yeah.
From Michael Fleischer's Beyond Redemption.
Yeah.
But to answer that question, I would go Beyond Redemption's up there. First Law also, because that's just like if you rewrote A Song of Ice and Fire and just turned it into Seinfeld. That's kind of what First Law is.
Yeah.
Okay, now I gotta read that.
Yeah, that's something I would lead people to. And then there's the Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. It's like another go-to. Like if you're looking for something that's a little bit more lighter, I suppose. But Steve, I have this question for you. What book would you recommend? And why is it that Berserk collection behind you?
Oh, wow. Okay, so what book would I recommend? I think it would depend on the person. I think First Law is a good... It's kind of Tarantino fantasy is... That's kind of because the character work, it reminds me of like something Tarantino would write. So I think that's a good entryway. If it's someone who really enjoys horror, who isn't bothered by violence and depravity, then I would maybe hand them The Darkness That Comes Before if I felt like they could handle it. And the Berserk collection behind me is because we read through the whole series. It took us about a year to read through all of it. And I don't know that it's grimdark. I don't know that I would say it's grimdark. I think it was very up and down, but I guess it could be grimdark. But yeah, I don't know. There's definitely elements, but I don't know that it's if someone was looking for grimdark, I don't know if that's where I would point them to.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say what I was going to say earlier is Fafford and the Grey Mouser, which is, I guess, more sword and sorcery, but I would say it's kind of approaching grimdark, by Fritz Lieber, and The Black Company too, which is good. It's good.
Haven't read that one yet. It's military fantasy, right? But,
yeah. The company of mercenaries in this pretty grimdark world. It's pretty fun.
So what is a grimdark book that doesn't get enough attention that you would want to shout out to get more people to read it? If someone look for something lesser known, it could be new or old or anything at all.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I'll let you guys handle this one.
So I'm on, I think, at the end of book 2 of the 5 Warrior Angels trilogy by Brian Lee Durfee. And I'd never heard of it at all. And somebody recommended it, and it's the sickest, darkest, most horrendous story I've ever read. It's the story that I have to stop reading it and read something else every now and then because it's just sick as hell, and it makes me feel a little bit ill. But it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's gratuitous, but it's not always gratuitous. But it's just so sick and twisted that I need a break once in a while.
Wow, that's a pretty strong endorsement.
Yeah. That's the one for you, kids.
I might have another one that I think of in a few minutes, but I know a bunch of people have read it, but I feel like he doesn't get enough credit. But Michael Moorcock's Elric of Melniboné series, I feel like he is owed a lot of money by a lot of people for how many ideas they've taken from him, like the Witcher series, Warhammer Fantasy and 40K. Let's see, Warcraft, Game of Thrones, you name it. He started the concepts, and I read his stuff last year, and I was really taken aback and kind of annoyed at how many ideas he made in the 60s and 70s that were blatantly ripped off of by very popular stuff today. And I'm not saying that, like, the people who made the stuff that I enjoy today are like, hacks or something, but I'm saying, like, he started a lot. Like, he started the concept of the Targaryens. He started the concept of, like, his protagonist is called the White Wolf, like Geralt from Witcher. He's also a pale-haired person that uses poultices and potions to, fight monsters. There's so many things in those books that if I was not more familiar with it or hadn't done my research, I've been like, he's blatantly ripping it off. But no, they must have done it to him. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. So I think more people should read his works to at least acknowledge that. But I guess I would also say probably yeah, that's probably the one that I'm going to say for now, but I'll probably think of something else in a minute.
I would recommend A Battle Lost by Dave Shaw. It starts off like a classic World War II adventure book. There's a young partisan who escapes the Nazis and then ends up forming like a band of outlaws that takes them on and helps the Allies. But my God, by the time it gets to the end of it, it is very grimdark. The ending of it, I think I read it 2 years ago now. I still think about it regularly. It hits you very firmly in the chest.
What's it called?
A Battle Lost.
A Battle Lost, okay. Something that's in a grimdark setting is The Black Tongue Thief, which I quite enjoy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, by Christopher Buehlman. Like, that's, yeah. I wouldn't say that the manner in which he wrote it is grimdark, but it's certainly in a pretty grimdark setting. Like, humanity is facing a species that's competing against it and eating humans, and like most of the soldierly population died, and all the horses have died, and it's it's a very fun story in a very grim world, and I quite like it a lot.
Yeah,
I
brilliant.
mean, cannibalism really should be part of the human diet.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, humans should eat the goblins too. So
yeah, that would be good. As far as something that I would shout out that probably very few people have heard of is actually I just read this recently. The Sound of Starfall by Scott Palmer. Um, it's a prelude to his novel, but it was a submission for this year's speculative novella contest. And this was a very, like, I would say, it's very good, but it did commit the cardinal sin of having more than one POV in a novella. But he still managed to make the characters like 3-dimensional. It was like, like he didn't need to do that, but it was a very enjoyable read. It was a very short read in such a way that, okay, everybody's screwed over. Everybody's about to die. There's a rebellion somewhere. A science experiment gone horribly wrong, and now the Armageddon is happening. There's a giant asteroid about to hit the Earth, just to add to the series of woes to the characters that have been introduced. Since it's a prelude, I'm not confident that any of these characters are alive. So you'll have to read the next book to find out what happens. But
yeah, Blockchain Thief it's funny, and it has a little bit of everything. It has some humor in it too. I believe the goblins. Yeah, I won't spoil anything, but I remember the goblins being pretty funny. Some of those scenes.
Yeah.
And his style is so sardonic. I think that's a very grimdark sort of trait as well. Just that kind of sarcastic, sardonic sort of worldview from the characters.
True.
So well written, brilliant book.
Yeah, and I'm certain it's fairly popular, but I don't see a lot of people talk about it in the circles that I'm in or that I view. So felt like I probably should mention it.
I feel like that's one of those books that goes around that everybody knows it exists, but people forget to read it.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of that, but I'm also guilty with Ryan Cahill's books too. It's like I've been meaning to read his books for years. I've just never gotten around to it.
Yeah.
There are too many good books out there. It's a difficult road.
Mm-hmm.
Way too many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
With so many books that are at our fingertips now, with all the books being printed and all the influences we have, I don't know that I would ever be able to write, because it would end up sounding like something else that I really like. Have any of you ever experienced that, where you write something or you create something and it's like, this sounds just like this other person's work? Is that something any of you think about, or is it? Because that's something I would worry about, because it would sound like a mixture of all the stuff I like, not something that I did.
Well, that's exactly why. I just don't think about it. I have so many influences. I pretty much wear them on my sleeve, and like I'll give a shout out and stuff to like my favorite author, my favorite song, band, whatever. I just don't think about it. I just write.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. That's never been a concern for me. Sometimes, like I'm consciously trying to channel other authors, like ones I'm big fans of. I'm never writing in the same genre as them, but I would like to be able to emulate their style if I can.
I would say if that's your I'll answer the question, but I'll also say if that's your hang up from starting to write, I would say that you don't need to worry too much. I'd say that that's happened to a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, with people stealing a bunch of ideas from Michael Moorcock, like, they became super successal, even though when I read Moorcock, I was like, wow, this is very blatant. But I think I do that all the, like, not steal ideas, but like I channel different authors all the time. I'm actually pretty good at that, I would say. Although I do definitely have my own style. But I think it's pretty fun to do. And I don't think using someone else's style is too bad because it's going to go through the filter of you anyway. Like no matter how much you try to, like write like someone else, or you've just read a book that's like some way, and so you feel like writing that way. You're still going to have your own style anyway. So I feel like it's not going to be that big of a deal unless you're purposefully just like copying word for word, which I don't recommend. But
Yeah.
Other than that, I think you don't need to worry about it too much. But like, sometimes, like if I read a book that's noir and then I write in that sort of like, rain drenched, first person point of view, and I could do it pretty well. But I don't feel like it's, since I'm not taking someone else's plot, I don't feel like I'm blatantly copying someone. I'm just like, well, I feel like writing a noir thing now, and I can write like that because I've seen plenty of stuff like that. But yeah, like I've purposefully tried to channel other authors, like I did for this with Conan, like, more than a few times. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be yours, and you're still going to be different. So that's my take on that.
I think we're always going to be right with influence because we're all readers as well. So we're all inspired by certain voices. I think, and that's homage. That's great. That sort of honors the craft. I think for me, when I wrote Callous and Crow, the big thing that I needed to do was create a world that wasn't like somebody else's. So I don't mind having influence how I write that world, but the actual world that it's set in, I really didn't want to have another fantasy world that was kind of like my characters are different, but it's still the same place essentially as Middle Earth or whatever. So that was really important to me to design the world and then go and write a story in it.
So I have been compared to, both as a compliment and as an insult, to writing like Tolkien does. So it is no mistake that one of my projects, Down Forest Black, seems heavily like Lord of the Rings inspired, because like it's very similar. You have like the same kind of like dichotomy. I mean, I did my own thing with it. So it doesn't exactly feel like you're in Middle Earth, because it still has, many of the characters are not necessarily something that you want to hang around with. Because like maybe they're cool, maybe you'd want to be friends, but they also are probably going to get you killed. Or, your house is going to be on fire just by association. And so it's not something I actively think about, but it is something that I'm constantly aware of. So, for instance, I mean, you could even say that the whole start of this anthology started with heavy inspiration from the greatest grimdark author of all time, and her name is Jane Austen. But I will. That is half true, but. Because she inspired the world that one of my settings is built off of, funny enough. And you won't really understand that at all. But in terms of, like, if this is something that you're hung up on or other people are hung up on, like, I say there's no original ideas. But it's a matter of how you choose to execute those ideas. that can really make them very, very different. So, like for example, like you have a strong correlation between the fictionalization of King Arthur being tied to the story of King David, because King David upset one of his sons, and his son decided to raise hell, and then you have Arthur and Mordred. You kind of like have the same thing, more or less, and but it's still done in like a different way that it feels different enough. So, like, no original ideas. How you choose to execute them and how you choose to portray them, that is what will separate like your story, even if it is a similar plot to someone else's.
Maybe it's just me.
I think
you should read more Jane Austen.
Yeah, definitely.
I think being compared to Tolkien would generally be a good thing. I think if people would ever use it as an insult, it's mostly because they sort of have a preconceived notion in their head, which some people have for certain things. Like, Tolkien's sometimes described as like describing a blade of grass for 2 pages, but like people say the same thing about Robert Jordan, right?
It's Stephen King too.
Yeah. But if you like, something people never really notice if you read Tolkien is that there's a lot of alliteration, and a lot of things are very precisely said, but people never really notice it because they're just kind of thumbing through and they're like, ugh, like I wish I would see more action when I think there's plenty of action too, actually, but like there's like when things are being described, it's extremely colorful. So I think generally that would generally be a good thing. But I would also say that, if someone tends to use it in insults, probably because they had an expectation of it to be like the movie.
I would say that, and also compared to, you're talking about like the general public too. Not many of them know that Tolkien was actually like involved with language. He created Elvish, his own language, based on other languages. He's a linguist. General public doesn't really know that. So, and like I said, they go by the movies, which are, they are awesome. They're some of my favorite movies. But it's also very different than the books, too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wouldn't see that as like an insult either, being compared to Tolkien.
Yeah,
I wear it with a badge of honor. Is what I do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry it takes me 10 pages to describe the single blade of grass. I'm sorry. I am not going to apologize for my inspirations.
So I know that Grimdark it feels like Grimdark had a peak. I don't want to say peak because it hasn't gone away, obviously. We're all here talking about it. Yeah. But it seems like it kind of hit its ceiling, or it's like a peak a year or two ago. And it seems like cozy fantasy is making a little bit of a comeback. Is that something? What could be the reason for that? About or even romantasy, as some people call it, like romance fantasy, cozy fantasy. Where do you think that comes from? Why is that the trend? I don't like it, but
Neither do
I think it's mostly to do with TV, and people got tired of Game of Thrones. I think I don't think it's really mostly a book phenomenon. It just kind of bleeds into the literature scene because they are based on books. But something that I really want is traditional fantasy to come back. People always say that like you shouldn't write something with an elf and a dwarf and a halfling because that's been done to death. And I'm like, I haven't read anything that's had that since the 90s. I would love to have that come back. I haven't seen a book on the shelves that just came out that has all of that for a super long time. But people have this idea that something's been done to death decades ago, and so it can never be made again. But I think that I think for the grimdark thing, I think it's mostly sort of Game of Thrones made it popular to make grimdark, and so people sort of it became like the McDonald's burger. And I'm not saying like grimdark's bad. I'm just saying like a bunch of people was like, oh, I'm going to write grimdark, and they're not really a fan of it, and so they kind of made like 80 books to where there'd usually be like 10, and then people were see it all across the shelves, and after that they were like, oh, I'm kind of tired of it now, and so they're going back. But I think romantasy has always been popular. It's never been my thing, but getting into writing, and you talk to other writers and readers, obviously that's a big deal for a lot of people. Romance books has always been huge. But I think that, I think the reason is just because there was a lot, and it just waxes and wanes. Just depends on the public perception. I think it'll go down a bit and then it'll come back again. Mm-hmm. So
I think it's kind of like grimdark is the heavy metal of the book scene. It's always going to be there, and sometimes it's going to peak, but it's never going to be the sort of top in the charts number one. It's an alternative kind of subclass of fantasy. Yeah. And people, there's tribalism. People need to sort of congregate in some way on a thing, and this time round, it's the romantasy and stuff. Nothing wrong with it. Again, it's not for me, but it's for a lot of people, obviously. But that'll have its day, and then the world will keep turning, and there'll be something else.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Romantasy, that's like romantic fantasy. Also got like the dark romance fantasy in there too, right?
I'll answer that question. So romantasy is just a romance novel set in a fantasy world.
Yeah.
That's like if you were to describe that genre to like anyone, that is the clearest possible way. I mean, nuances exist. So people have typical like fantastical plots. So, but like it's all it is about like the romance. So if you're in the middle of a battle, that battle will grind to a halt just so that the love interest can have their moment. and that's exactly, or they'll find a bush somewhere, but that's besides the point. But I think with cozy fantasy, like we really saw that with Travis Baldree, mm-hmm. And that kind of like led to like a strange people. Oh, I'm gonna write this little like slice of life thing about set in a fantasy world that like so and so's envisioned, and everybody jumped on that bandwagon. A lot of people wanted to read it, and then it just like died. And I think that's just like the way that I guess like marketing as far as like media goes. There's this super populated thing. It saturates the market, and then everybody's sick and tired of it. And then they go and like find the next thing, and then here's like this whole trend that nobody ever saw coming. I mean, I'm with Ben too, because I do want to see more traditional, like classic fantasy with elves, dwarves, orcs, and those economy. That's like it's really hard to find it because Wizards of the Coast doesn't publish books anymore like they used to.
Sure.
And you're not allowed to, like you can submit games and whatnot, but that's about it. Like, I mean, I've written and published a couple of them, but they're, very much in the middle of nowhere. They're hard to find sometimes. But like the more recent one I can think of that gained any popularity was, and this was a while ago, was the Inheritance Cycle. And I think everyone already knows like my gripe with the Inheritance Cycle, and it had nothing to do with the elves and the dwarves in it, but that's beside the point. That's me ranting, is what that is.
I would say that. I mean, my first short story that I ever wrote had an elf protagonist that was it was sort of like a Forgotten Realms book almost, but it was a dark mystery. And it's called The Book of Vosh. And I was quite proud of it. I still am. But I would kind of wish that would come back because, I think people also have preconceived notions on that kind of stuff too. But I would also say I kind of don't dislike that grimdark fantasy is kind of going down a little bit because, one, there's so many good books out there, it gives me time to read them.
It's true.
Yeah. And two, when I write it, it'll be in a smaller market where it might get more views, maybe, like it might be more niche, So it's not the worst thing in the world, but I think it'll come back again too.
Yeah, I don't really think it's on a downslope. At least not enough to catch up with our TBRs. It's not, there's still books being published. Just still lots of great stuff out there. But it is nice to get a little bit of a reprieve from all the great books coming out and let people read the Romantasy for a couple of years and give me a chance to catch up.
Yeah,
too much to read.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess I know publishers are looking for more. Of course, they're going to go with whatever trend is kind of the latest thing, and they'll jump on the bandwagon and kind of go with what people are interested in. I really do think that it's kind of a burnout from all the madness in the world, and people want something easy and cozy and with a happy ending. We have no happiness this anthology, but I think they want something that's kind of like they want something. I don't want to say fast food because I don't want to sound disparaging because it's still good, but they want something easily digestible and there's no stakes. It's just kind of a cozy read.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Grimdark does a great job of taking you out of reality and then reminding you that it's not all that bad.
Yeah, I agree with that.
True. Yeah.
Depends on the book. I don't know.
Yeah.
The one of you, I forget which one I mentioned. Oh, we mentioned Brian Lee Durfee's book, or I think it was Durfee's book that really stuck with you.
Yeah.
A Court of Broken Knives by Anna Smith Spark. That third book still haunts me from time to time. What is a series or book that has stuck with all of you that really made that impact on you? That's like you think about from time to time, whether it was done really well or the story went a way you didn't expect. Something that you look back on and say, "Wow, that was wild."
I'll throw Robin Hobb in again. Robin Hobb, the Farseer trilogy was such an amazing series that I refused to read the Live Ship Traders because it could never ever live up to it. I refused for years, and then I read the Live Ship Traders, and it was just as good, if not better, and absolutely blew me away. That everything about the whole series was incredible. There's kind of, again, fairly classic fantasy, but really introspective, first-person, heart-wrenching stuff. But you've also got dragons, and you've also got all the ingredients that you want out of fantasy, but delivered in a really unique way.
I have to say Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That entire trilogy, I reread it every year. It's just so many things stay with me from it. I constantly joke with my sister and stuff about 42 and the life universe and everything. And I don't know, it's just something about it, the humor and the absurdness of it all. Just, I keep coming back to it every year.
I didn't expect that. That's good.
I think the one for me would be Julian May's Galactic Maloo trilogy. I don't often hear people talk about it, but it's a very strange set of books. Kind of taking Catholic mythology and projecting it into the future, and having this kind of Book of Revelations apocalypse, but in space.
Julian, what was the last name? My TBR.
Julian May.
About TBRs. I have about 10 books on it with this conversation. Oh, nice. American science fiction, fantasy, horror, science, and children's writer. Nice. Yeah, we've been reading as a group the Big Book of Science Fiction. It's all these different science fiction short stories. I think Vandermeer put it together, and we've been reading one every week and going. They're in chronological order, and it's pretty wild to see the way that each story is written is some kind of a reflection of that time period.
Yeah, it's actually. I have a couple collections of. I got science fiction from the 20s till now. I got horror, mystery. So yeah, you're right. It's pretty amazing to see what each period is based on that.
The question was on a book that stuck with you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say there's a couple. I would say that I loved Disillusion by R. Lee Byers. It's probably one of the best books with dark elves I've ever read. And that usually sticks with me with how well it's written. I would say that Skaven Slayer and Beast Slayer from Godric and Felix series are some of the best grimdark books I've ever read. And just like the comedy with the grittiness of it's super good, and it's very quotable. Let's see. I would say maybe Sword Mage by Richard Baker. Stuck with me. The two I would say for Ari Salvatore is Promise of the Witch King and the Thousand Orcs. Those always stuck with me quite a bit. But there's a lot of good stuff in there as well. I wish I could just give you one, but there's so many. But yeah, like whenever I'm writing, a lot of the times those books are the ones that I'm thinking about, I would say.
How often do you go back and reread those books?
I haven't read any of them in like the past few years, but I've reread them a bunch in my lifetime, definitely. Right now, the last few years, I'm going through trying to get through new books. But I've definitely read like R.A. Salvatore's books like 3 times over, and I've read Godric and Felix like 7 times over. It's a lot. I've only read Sword Mage, I think, once, but that did really stick with me. I've read in Disillusion a couple of times by R. Lee Byers. I would say I've read Graham McNeil's Ultramarine series quite a bit, and that's a very good 40K books. Yeah, I would say I used to be a huge rereader, but in recent years I've tried to curb that so I can read some new stuff, and it let me read stuff like Michael Moorcock and Stafford and the Grey Mouser and different stuff like that. But how would let's see. There was one other that, I am rereading Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series right now. It's super long, but I feel like the descriptions in it are really good, and I kind of I'm reading it so I can get better at descriptions.
Better descriptions. Is there another book that any of you read to get better at either characterization or pacing or whatever, any other aspect that you look for to go back and even if you just reread portions of a book to get kind of inspiration or to see what they did or transitions that they've done to get ideas in your own work?
There's a couple I can mention for a variety of different reasons. So I think Tolkien is good for descriptions, as like if you're paying attention to the style of prose because it flows quite musically.
Yeah, I agree.
He's describing it. That's one. As far as characterization goes, I really don't think there's any better place than um, Joe Abercrombie, because he captures speech patterns quite well. Um, and as far as like plot goes, I usually would not go for Robert Jordan, but because he's very, very long winded. But in terms of like just general prose, like if that's all you're looking for, he's not grimdark by any stretch of the means, but Gallus Christian's Lancelot is great. So I wouldn't say that's a book that stuck with me. Rather, it was an experience that stuck with me because it was just like reading it. It was fine, and then I decided to like read it out loud. It's like, oh, all right, this is not a book. It shouldn't be called a book. It is a poem, is what it is, and it has a lot of that poetic language to it. That really kept people engaging. So every time I ever see Gallus Christian on Twitter, I always like make a sniveling comment about like this is like the worst book in the world. But as far as like poetry goes, it is amazing. You should definitely read it.
So right now I'm reading a book of short stories by Neil S. Reddy, and these are really short sort of stories, like 2 pages per story. So there's a lot in a full-length book, and that's been really good just to teach me like how much can you fit into a tiny snippet of writing. It's been really good, like seeing how you can get I wouldn't say an entire story, but essentially a narrative with expectations and a conclusion in very few words.
I would say while I'm reading, if I ever see something that I quite like I'll usually have like a receipt or something as the bookmark, and I'll rip off a little piece of paper and put it in that page if I'm ever doing that. So I usually do that. So there's plenty of books that I would take from, but I guess, like I said, Robert Jordan with the descriptions. I would also say characterization. I think I wouldn't say his dialogue is the best, but I think that his characterizations are pretty good sometimes. I would say characterizations. William King is quite good at characterization, actually, at least when it comes to a certain point of view. And I think that shaped me a lot because it was third person, but it was still very point of view heavy, which sometimes in certain books they have like an omniscient narrator, but still looks through someone's eyes. But this time it's very much not. But let's see. Yeah, there's I would have to talk for hours to get through all of them, but there's plenty of books. It'd be hard to choose which one's great for which, really. I would say that if I ever think a plot twist is very good or a premise is very good, I will like keep a book at a certain place to make sure I remember it. But like Richard Baker wrote, what was it called? It was called City of Ravens, which I think is a very good premise. It's about a thief that finds that he's a very amoral thief. He's charming, but he only really cares about himself. And then he is tasked to do a bunch of different things by a bunch of different people, and somehow they're all interconnected. But they lead to this person trying to take over the city that he finds out that he really likes, or that he feels a sort of allegiance to. He never thought he did. But because when the city is in danger, he's like, you know what? I'm from here. I'm from the City of Ravens, and I don't like this person trying to take it over. And the premise of it, I quite enjoyed in the way he wrote it. And so I kind of kept that in mind. And that's going to be something that I'm using for a novel at some point, which is just that basic premise, not any plot threads or anything. But yeah, I think that's the one that I've taken the most recently. But yeah, there's a bunch. You'd really have to list the authors that you like and then what they're best at, and you'd be like, oh, I'm definitely taking from that. So
I think the only books that I possibly ever have reread are David Gemmell books, and I think David Gemmell was the master of, even if it was in a series, of putting the right amount of everything in one book and saying that is the end of the book. Like the perfect journey, the perfect ending, the perfect amount of characters, pacing, everything. So even in a series, he kind of writes the perfect individual book. And they're the ones that I reread, and they're the ones that, if anything, I will go back and go, have I got enough in this word count to do what David Gemmell would have done?
I would say there's plenty of video games and movies that I would do that as well, not just books. For like characterization and plot threads, like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, those definitely. And, obviously more recent ones, but, RPGs are a very good resource for that. Mass Effect, Dragon Age.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to go with the opposite. I'm going to go with one that I like the premise, I like the idea, but I hate the ending. Any of M. Night Shyamalan. His ideas are good, but his endings are no. And that's why I use him as inspiration to try to avoid sometimes.
Yeah.
You see, sometimes you need someone to do something poorly so you know exactly what not to do.
Yeah.
I became a very efficient dishwasher. I watched what the other guy was doing and did the exact opposite. But I think like the games, there's definitely a couple that come to mind that do characterizations very well. That even aren't just limited to just straight up RPGs. Yeah. Like one that comes to mind is the Plague Tale present franchise, and even despite the fact that it's not technically over, I am very much looking forward to the third installment because it's not taking place in. I mean, it might still take place in France. I don't know, but it's not going to be the France that we recognize from the show because it's like years, centuries after Plague Tale. But like the characterization of the characters was done well and portrayed well. You had like the tone of voice that was perfect. Like you distinctively like knew who each other was, and as well as like with their speech patterns, things that they would say and how they would say it. And
And
those are some things
I would
that
class those as grimdark games as well.
Yeah, Plague Tale. Yeah, I remember like identifying it as a grimdark, and in that same group that we're in. And I distinctively remember someone, I forgot who it was, said, I hesitate to call it grimdark, but because it has those nice moments in between, kind of like Berserk does. It has those nice moments, but those nice moments, like, are they really nice moments? Or is it just a break before a break from the madness before it introduces us to like some of the most horrifying things that you're ever going to be exposed to?
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I'm not anymore, but I used to be a big Blizzard fan, and I think Warcraft 3, and that had great characterization. It's an RTS game. I quite love that. Man, and there's a lot of games in the early 2000s that were great for characterization, I think, and plot too.
Last of Us is another one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm actually replaying the Last of Us 2 at the minute, and in terms of writing and the sort of side stories that are just creeping in constantly, it's an absolute cinematic bit of genius.
Yeah, I think some of the genius of that game was like upon like a second or third playthrough, like if you're as you're like playing through one of the characters, you start like hearing like long-term like echoes, like, oh, wait a minute, that's the other side of the story that's happening.
Yeah.
And that was like a nice like Easter egg to find.
Honestly, I think in that tune, I think video games objectively cause have ideas and characterizations that are good enough to cause book series about the video games. Like I love the Halo series, and when they started writing Halo novels, a lot of them are some of the best military science fiction I've read. And you wouldn't expect that from a video game series, but like you pick it up and you're like, this is actually really well written, and no, a lot of them are pretty epic. And it just happened because it's a popular game, and it was a universe that was ripe with being able to write in it. So.
So, Kieran, you watch the M. Night movies for inspiration on what not to do.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite? Do you have a, I don't say favorite, but is there one that you like the most, even if you dislike it? But what's the number one bad M. Night end in your book?
The Village.
Okay.
The premise, just the premise alone was awesome. Like, you have these people that are just living in the olden times, no modern medicine, no nothing, and there's something hunting them. Yeah, in the woods. And then the whole reveal, like, he falls flat on every single ending, I think. I think the only one he didn't fall flat, and I also didn't like the movie itself, was the one with Bruce Willis.
Unbreakable?
No, the first one he did with Bruce Willis.
Oh, Sixth Sense, right?
Yeah, that's the only one that the ending actually works with the movie, I feel. Not that I like the movie in the first place, but...
I see dead people.
Yeah.
Could that be the most? I'm guessing that's probably most people's favorite because I think it was his first movie, but it must kind of suck to have that be your shtick, to have it be like what you're known for. So you always have to have a twist at the end or some kind of. That must be frustrating to be stuck in that box, I would imagine, because everyone's expecting it. So if you don't have the twist, and it's like, what's like when the M. Night movie, there's no twist. There's not even a bad twist. What's going on?
Yeah.
I thought The Village was okay.
No, I like it.
We personally like The Village, but like I think like another stick as like you were kind of like mentioned, just being annoyed by like staying in the shtick. I think Joe Abercrombie has expressed dissatisfaction with him taking his like his name as like the Lord Grimdark. So now he's just like written himself off into this corner. So whenever he tries to go like YA, like he can't like truly write YA because it's still got to have that grittiness, or else it's not really Joe Abercrombie. It's it's something or someone else.
I've actually interviewed David Drake before, if you know that author, and he, he was kind of I've read a few of some of his stuff, and a few of my friends, particularly one of them, is a huge David Drake fan. But when I was talking to him, he said that when he wrote Hammer Slammers, that military science fiction that was pretty popular, very popular, really. Ever since then, he's written a ton of different genres, but he became the Hammer Slammers guy. And it's the same with Glenn Cook and the Black Company. He's written before and after it in different genres, but people always just like ask him about the Black Company. It's just kind of authors getting typecast or put in this little pigeonhole, even though they've done a lot of wide-ranging work, kind of thing. So yeah, it happens.
I think kind of in the same kind of related, but with Martin and A Song of Ice and Fire, I can't imagine ever having to finish that series after all that happened with the adaptation. That must really be tough. That must be a tough position to be in, like a blessing and a curse for it to become this cultural phenomenon, and then now where are the books, and you can't do exactly what the adaptation did because everyone's so upset with it. So what do you do? Because no matter what he does, he can crush it. And no one's going to be happy. Well, there'll be a section that will be happy, but I mean, everyone's going to have opinions on what he. So that must be a really, really tough spot to be in.
I'm with the unpopular opinion that he doesn't owe anyone anything. Like if he doesn't, people do want him to finish those books, and like I don't blame them for wanting it, but like I don't think that, they're his books, and if he feels like writing them, then he can write them, and if he doesn't, that's his prerogative. Like. He's given people many hours of entertainment already. He doesn't owe them more,
Right.
Yeah. I think the one bad thing he's doing is that he sometimes promises that he'll release at a certain time, and then he doesn't. That's the bad thing. But if he just went out and said like, it'll get out when it gets out, or I'm not going to write it, people will get mad, obviously, but like eventually they'll stop. I think he kind of prolongs it a little bit himself, but I also think that he doesn't owe someone his work. It's his work.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Although if he doesn't manage to get the next couple of books out before he dies, the publisher's going to find someone else to write them for him.
Like Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. Yeah.
Or they'll just keep on going through his unpublished works, releasing them as new parts of it.
I think he said recently that if he doesn't finish it before death, then I think it's in his will or whatever to not finish the books. No, he doesn't want anyone else to finish it. So I believe that's what I read somewhere, that if it's not him, no one will finish it. So it won't be a Sanderson Wheel of Time kind of thing.
Oh no, it won't be
with Robert Jordan. He
wait for 70 years for it to go out of copyright.
I was just about to say that.
It's anybody's fair game.
Yeah.
Well,
with Robert Jordan, he chose Brandon Sanderson because he knew he was dying. But I think that in another case, they would just pick somebody.
So if you were, a question for all of you, if you had a really popular series and there was a possibility you wouldn't be able to finish it for whatever reason, who would you pick to finish your story?
Ooh.
Or would you not want it to be finished if it wasn't you? Everybody.
Yeah.
I
don't know who
I will say that I think it's in my bucket list to eventually have worlds that other people write in. I think that's something that I've always wanted to do. Like Star Wars, I'm a big Star Wars fan. And I'm not saying I'm ready for that now, but I would like eventually to go, yeah, by all means, Mr. Abercrombie, write me a story. Yeah, I think that's always been in the mix.
See, no, I'm of two minds about this because if I read a series before, say, the main author was dead, okay? So he's still alive and read his series. And then he dies and he has someone take over the series. Read that book, I'm going to keep comparing it to the original author. It's always going to happen for me. So I guess in a way I would like for my stuff to be continued. But with the way that my mind works on something, sometimes it would probably have to just be someone within my family to continue it, or just leave it alone.
I think for me, if something tragic were to happen to me tomorrow, and magically someone wants to finish my fantasy trilogy, then Peter F. Hamilton. Because he's the author I'm trying to channel the most when I'm writing it. I'm often thinking about the way that he manages to interweave different characters' lives.
I would probably be a little too prideful to let anyone else do it. I'd probably, I like, as much as I try not to be that way, I'd be like, well, I mean, it's mine. It came from me. I don't know if I would choose anyone. I would have to have co-written something with them and then really felt that they were familiar enough with my work and my mindset to do it. I would, as much as there are certain authors that I love and even idolize, I would not just choose them out of the blue, just because as much as I love their work, I know it's not my work. Even if I think their work is better than my work, I'd still be like, it's still a series that I'm laboring on. But so I either would not, or it'd have to be someone who I write with, who I've written with or write with already, for me to really do that. Probably. I mean, I might change my mind at some point in the future, but that's what I feel like right now, probably.
As we know with the Saw franchise, your perspective changes when you realize you have 3 minutes to live.
Yeah.
But on a more serious note, like I'm kind of in the mindset of like DBs. Like I do have a world that I am in the process of working with that I would eventually like to license out, and people can like write their own like stories in that setting. That would be cool to see take off.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Yeah.
And I think if there was like one series that I have that I would really like to take off, would be like my Holy Grail saga bit, which is going to be like a 20 to 30 year endeavor. Now, when I was like earlier in my youth, I was toying with the idea of joining the service, and so a very real thing that popped up in my mind is like I could get shot tomorrow. That idea of having someone finish my projects, in the case that something happened to me, was always in question, and so I do have a cousin of mine whom I would trust to finish that, because that's a more, I would say, a more serious philosophical book. That like you kind of have to have certain like ideals in place, and if you put someone who does not necessarily share those ideals, something eventually is going to get broken with how complicated that series is. But I think like in the same mind of like Ben, it's like you really have to know who it is before you would even attempt to bring someone in to like finish your project. Though if Token came back from the dead, like and wanted to finish it, like by all means, take the wheel.
Actually, it'd be interesting to actually come up with the like say an anthology featuring one of your characters, just have other authors take you on an adventure.
True.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
That would be cool. So on the flip side, if someone like Martin came to one of you and said, I have really rough notes, not a whole lot of detail, but here are the keys. If something should happen to me, it's all yours. Would you accept it?
No. I'm out. I would maybe write a different story in his world, but I would feel I was kind of too intimately inside his characters, and I wouldn't like it.
I would give it a shot.
If it was a different author, if it was a few specific authors, maybe, but I wouldn't want to do Martin's work now. I'd have to say, like, I can't do this. Sorry, I have to find someone else, but I'm flattered. But, like, but if it was someone else, like maybe, I don't know, one of the authors that I've mentioned before whose work I quite like and very familiar with, I've read and reread, maybe I would feel confident enough. But probably not his, at least. Probably not most, I would say.
Yeah, I think there's too much to hold in your head to try and get all his characters to even give them a decent showing. Yeah. I would have to ask how much the advance was, but then probably say no.
I guess it's the first question, right? How much?
Well, in this scenario, by the time we take the wheel, Martin is dead, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he came to you apparently, right?
Yeah, if something
Right,
he said,
but
at this point, he's gone.
Okay, all right. Then yeah, I would take it. Absolutely. With the prompts. All right, I've got all the notes. Guys, your ending is coming in 12 months. Here is your ending. You've been waiting for 12 patient years. This is what you're getting. And I'll call it a day. There may or may not be space Nazis. And that's fine. You're just going to have to live with it.
That advance better be enough for you to change your name and to relocate somewhere. You'd be in some trouble if you did that.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
I know it's getting late for some of you, but I did have one last question for all of you I'd like to ask. I think you may have already answered this, but or because we did speak before, so you may have already answered this, but something I'd like to ask everybody is, what was your first job, and what did you learn from that experience? Everybody looks nervous.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and start. And this is like a recap because I have answered this question before, but maybe my answer has changed since then. So my first mundane job was a dishwasher. And I learned how to be very efficient with my time.
Okay.
And I'll leave it at that. So that's led me well over the last 15 years.
That was also my first job. And I guess the biggest thing for me was to learn that at some point you're staring at that massive pile of work and you don't really think you're ever going to get through it. And you always do. And you always go home and you always succeed in some way. You survive that pile of nightmare and you always get through it.
I was also a dishwasher too.
Wow.
Yeah, I was dishwasher for a pizzeria before I became cook. And the funny thing is that I've always actually wanted to work in a pizzeria. So in a way, kind of, it'll come true. You work at it, it'll come true.
Kind of make me hungry. I was a bag boy at a grocery store, and I wasn't it for very long. But I guess I learned how to be somewhere on time and how to, I guess, be. Well, I don't know if this job taught me that. I think I was raised to be pretty polite, but it did make you obviously be very polite to everybody. So I think that was. I might give that credit for that too. I think I learned more in other jobs, definitely, but I think that's what I learned in that one.
So my first ever job was waiting tables in an Italian cafe. I learnt I am not good at customer-facing jobs. I got fired after, I think it was 2 months, maybe. And that was, they should have done it earlier.
I think it's pretty interesting those experiences, with how they shape us throughout the rest of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
As a waiter for 7 years, I am curious as to why you think you should have gotten fired earlier than 2 months.
Oh, I got people's orders wrong. I calculated their bills wrong. Would regularly knock over coffees and things. And just not very good. Like, customers would try and have a joke with me, and I would just not get it.
That can be frustrating. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for hanging out. I know the time always flies, and before I know it, it's 2 hours later. But
yeah,
I know some of you are across the world, and it gets late. But if you tell us all where we can find you, if you have a website or social media where we can find you and find your work, and also the release date for No Happy Endings is November 12th. Is that right?
Yes.
And this will be on the 8th. Is there a pre-order available?
Yeah, pre-order is available right now. And this is going to be a bit it's not exclusive to anywhere. So Amazon, Kobo, wherever you get your ebooks, and there is even a paperback option, so you can order that from your library or your local bookstore if you want to keep it local instead of just going through a big aggregate like Amazon.
Yes, and where can we find everyone? Who wants to go? Who wants to go first? Be the first victim.
I'm on Facebook, and then I also have my own editing company called Flying Squirrels Editing Services. You can find me at Flying Squirrels Editing .square.site. And I'm on Facebook too. So,
for me, I have a Twitter, Prince of Swole, because I like working out. Let's see. I also have an email if anyone wants to email me at itdwriter189. And ITD is the abbreviation of what I was originally going to call my shared universe, Into the Dark, but I changed it. But I kept the acronym at least. So if anyone wants to email me about writing, that's where you should email me.
It's a good acronym, though.
Oh, I feel like it is.
You can find me on Facebook or Instagram. Just search for Ali John Smith, or Google Ali John Smith. That'll take you to my website.
Yes. And a lot of these links down below. And what about you, DB?
I've got a pretty much a presence on all social media platforms. I'm not very good at some of them, but I am on there. And I've got a website, dbrookbooks.com, where you can find me mainly interviewing other authors' characters as a kind of series. That some of them are quite interesting. And then there's all the news, what's coming up for me as well. Mostly on Twitter, though. I have to say, Twitter is number one.
All right. I guess I'll go.
I think you're the last
I'm
one.
available on Facebook. I'm definitely most active on Twitter and Blue Sky right now underneath the same Arminus Arfenial or Sarcastic Elf. You should usually easily find me under that. I have my own website as well. If you wanted to shoot an email, that's just arminusarfenial.com. That'll take you right to like a contact page where you can also see my catalog of books. But No Happy Endings will obviously be there, but you don't want to get spammed by everything because nobody likes processed meat in a can. Processed meat on the page and used as a bookmark, that's another thing that nobody wants. But I'm sure someone has tried to use it.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, cool. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for making time. I know it's hard to get us all together in one place with all the different time zones, and especially now this time of year, it's tough. So thanks, everyone, for making time. And everyone, the link will be down below for the book and all the websites, so be sure to check them out and get your copy. So it's delivered to you on the 12th of November. Sorry.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
so much.
I appreciate it.